I have staff. That's amazing. It's amazing. And I keep going back to this little girl from Steelton. I am so proud of what we do in here and who the Tap Pups are. It's an amazing program.
And I will say, we worked very hard, my mother and I worked really hard with her to really identify and put on paper what her philosophy is. And not that, you know, paper means anything, but once you start writing that down, she's like, what do you mean my philosophy? I said, trust me, you have a philosophy. She said, no, I do what I do. I said, yeah, and you do it amazing. When somebody does something that well, there is a true philosophy. And we've worked for years on truly perfecting, well, actually, it wasn't years. It was like one afternoon we figured. I mean, it wasn't that hard. What am I talking? But what we worked years on is making sure that that philosophy is at the core of this program. So any instructor, obviously all the technical aspects have to be there, but they've got to really buy into what her philosophy of happiness through tap is. And that's what transcends, and it's making sure that the environment is the right social energy, the right, you know, it's no one's speaking down to an older student because she might be of age, you know, a certain age. They're there to learn, and you know, the instructors are there to teach, and they do. It's a really dynamic, and I feel that it's really surprising to people when they get a real glimpse and an inside view of what's going on in this studio. It doesn't exist anywhere else. No, it doesn't.
And it's amazing the energy that they get here. You know, a lot of people come too because they want to exercise. And when we were in high school, only men went to gyms. The guys went to gyms. We're not gym people. So mentally, most of us still aren't wanting to go to gyms. But we're dancers. I bet you every baby boomer is a dancer, and we're out there dancing. And of course, I use the songs from the 50s and 60s to coordinate, to pull out that happiness. Every once in a while, we'll throw in a Madonna song. I've had Material Girl. They've danced the Material Girl, and they were a little bit upset at that. Well, that took 3 seconds. Then all of a sudden, I'm hearing all these things they want to do with Madonna, and I'm like, no, 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 we're not going there. No, no. So, but it's a lot of fun, and I protect the adults because I've been hearing on TV, and it's almost so condescending. It's like, oh my gosh, you're over 55. Well, you can't dance. Well, you can't hear. You certainly aren't going to look good doing anything. You're not going to have any friends anymore. Just, you know, just cook for us, babysit for us. You don't. And I really, really protect that. So when I started hearing that, the first song they came back in September, and I told my classes, we're going to show the world we're still able to do just what they do. And I said, as a matter of fact, we're learning our new dance, the jump jiving. And they went, what? We're going to need a paramedic. I said, no, we're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. But they can move. They can move. And a lot of the husbands, when they come to see the shows, they're the funniest of all. Usually they're coming because they have to the shows. And they're sitting there like this. And then afterwards, they'll come over to me. These women are serious dancers. I said, I know they are. I know.
Do you have any men express interest in
Oh, yeah. I have about 10 men.
You do?
Mm-hmm. I have about 10 men. I have about 4 husband and wife teams. One of the guys is Rick Hoover. He's an instructor here. He hadn't danced since he was 15 years old. His wife danced 1 year as a kid. So once he came back into dancing, he said to his wife, I think you need to do this. So now she's in the beginner 3 level, and he actually ends up teaching her class. It's just a coincidence, but he does. So yeah, no, there's a lot. There's a lot, and actually if I get enough men that want to be in the show, that's the trick. I would love to have an all-men's dance on stage someday.
When you sat down to write this book, is it hard to write about tap dancing and put the things you know in your head about dancing into words?
Here's the thing about writing, which until this book, I would write. My mother always said to me, you write from your heart, Vicki. You always write from your heart, whatever you feel. But I thought at 62, 63 years old, I'm not going to remember some of these things. When you sit down and start your story, there is a wave of memories that come out of your head that it was like yesterday. There is so much detail that I remembered. Some of my girlfriends that know me for 50 years, how on earth did you remember that? I forgot we did that. I forgot. And it's just, no, it was so easy. The tap technique, it was like I never stopped dancing. It was always there. Yeah, it's fun.
And there's some pretty personal stuff in the book. Did you feel awkward about including that?
Extremely awkward.
Whose idea was that to include it?
You know, that's a good question. It was.
It was his.
Well,
it was a combination of his and our agent.
When we first were approached by a book agent, and it was a friend of mine that I've known from LA, and she's, ever since I met her, she's been a big fan of my mother through my stories and through, you know, the Tap Pups, and she's like, you know, Brian, there is a book in this. I thought, a book?
Story,
like,
yeah.
You know, what book is this? Like, you know, a coffee table book on technique? What is she talking about? She's like, no, and finally, and I think when you're so close to, you know, to building something that you know, it's so personal. You lose sight of how to translate that into a, you know, like a personal book. I mean, like a personal, you know, work of nonfiction. It just seems a little bit of a stretch. And she pulled me aside and said, Brian, I'm telling you, there's that journey that your mother went on, and the partnership, and the way that that program impacts women, and what's that quiet ripple that it's having, that effect that it's having in central Pennsylvania. She's like, that's a big story. And, you know, we bit, and we started writing some outlines for a proposal, and
she's the one. She's really the one. Swan is the one that called, and she says, you know, Vicki, I know your backstory too. She said, it needs to be told. And I cried. I said, oh, not that. I actually, things happen in my marriage that I didn't want even my mother to know. You have a lot of pride, and it didn't happen constantly, but one time is enough to end things. But every morning it would be, I'll never do that again. And I had abuse in my marriage. I shouldn't say just, but it was a few times. And she said, you don't understand. And she convinced me, and I know she's right. I know she's right because after people have read the book, I have so many Tap Pups that came up to me and thanked me for sharing my life, because they said, I went through that too, Vicki, and I thought I was the only one in this whole organization that went through that. I have so many people, and it would help other people too, young women, people that are going through it in their older years, that you can get out of a situation. You can get out of it. Lead with your strength. There's strength somewhere in there. Remember what it was that you like to do. Just like if you like to cook, do something in the cooking field. Do something you like to do. Not everybody has the profession that I have. But look at me now. I got out of there. And Brian can tell you, if there was a problem between his father and I when they were sleeping, Michael and Brian were sleeping, the next morning, it's regular morning, we're having breakfast, we're going to go out to the park, we're going to do this. I'm a mommy the next morning. What happened between my husband and I is done, at least as far as they're concerned. And that's what you have to do.
You opened your first dance studio at age 17?
I did. I did.
And you mentioned Steelton. For people who have never been there, what was Steelton like when you were growing up?
I moved away after a while, but I'll tell you what, Steelton was the most fun, the most wonderful experience of my life. And anybody that grew up with me will tell you that. It was really weird for me when I got a little older. I ended up head majorette at Steel High School. and all the head majorettes throughout the local high schools around here, you meet. And my peers at the time would say to me, "Oh my gosh, you live in Steelton, aren't you afraid?" I said, "Of what?" I was like shocked that this little area was afraid of Steelton. I had no clue. It was the safest people. We would walk around and there was nothing. But I'll tell you what, I'm thinking it might be how strong we were in sports and how tough we were, that people assumed that there had to be tough people down there. It was a melting pot. My father was born in Croatia, and his family came over. So as Croatians and Slovenians, it's Slavic people, it's Italians. We have all this nationality growing up with. All my friends were a different nationality. I got to learn foods and languages, and we were close. We could walk to all of our friends' places. I wouldn't have given up those days for anything.
What were you thinking at age 17 starting a dance studio?
Well, at that time, you could be a secretary, or you could go to school to be a nurse. You could be an airline stewardess, or a teacher. That's pretty much the limit for women back then, so we thought. And I thought, I don't want to do any of those. I don't want to do that. I wanted something creative. And believe it or not, it was really weird that I myself didn't think of this. I took dance my whole life. When I graduated, I got a phone call from some lady in Steelton that said, "Vicki, could you teach my daughter how to twirl baton?" I said, "Absolutely." It was within a half an hour. I had 7 students. That mother called, that mother called, that. And I started laughing, and I said, this was a no-brainer, and I couldn't believe I didn't think of it myself. I called my mother at work. I said, "I know what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to teach dancing, and I want to share what I fell in love with and how happy I've been because of dance to all the kids in Steelton. I want to teach." My mother said, "Let's do it." So she called Philadelphia, a school in Philly, and I became certified. I went down for a couple weeks and stayed at the school. And I learned everything I needed to learn to run a business.
Was it an overnight success?
Yeah, it was, actually. Yeah, it was. Well, listen, Steelton's a small town. And at the time, if you were head majorette or head cheerleader or football quarterback, you're just a little superstar in our world. And people know your name, and they knew I could dance. So I ended up, through writing the book, I said, Brian asked me, "Well, Mom, how did you get this started?" I said, "Well, I picked up the phone, and I knew all these families that had children. My mother did posters. We put them on all the stores in town. You didn't need any other way to spread the news in Steelton, because everybody would go in to Ray's Luncheonette or to the bank, Dolphin Deposit in Steelton. I had a meeting. I said, I want to have a meeting. I put that out, and it's going to be August whatever, and I want the parents and the children, I wanted to meet both of them for this meeting to discuss what I want to do with my program. Well, I had 50 parents and their children in this little studio in Steelton. And every one of them signed up that night. So I had 50 people.
But you were 17 and you had to
17.
deal with, did you have problems with parents?
Not a bit.
No stage moms?
No, but see, the thing is, I was an only child, and I was never raised as a little kid. And I was so confident. Well, to back it up just a tad, when I was growing up in a dance studio, I was so fortunate. I took to dancing as though I was born to dance. And I was always in a front line. It came easy to me. My teacher at 9 years old, I was 9, she said to me, "Vicki, there's a little girl in the back that started late. She's 4 years old. Could you take her into the dressing room and give her some lessons to catch her up? She's having a little trouble." And I thought, me? I would love to. So I took this little girl, held her hand so she would pay attention to me. And that's almost what I did with the parents. I was very authoritative, and I talked as though this is what we're going to do, this is what we need to do, and they listened. And now, not until I was like 50 did I think,